All right, hey guys, welcome to Congress Lecture 3, right? This is pages 7 through 9. Let me start the timer right here, sorry. All right, timer, stopwatch, reset. Okay, so let's try to get this thing done. I always think I'll get done in less than 20 minutes, but it never seems to happen, right? Okay, so Congress. So page 7, there's a lot of just kind of big picture overview that hopefully starts to sound familiar to you, right? Bicameralism, right? This is a result of the Great Compromise, of the Connecticut Compromise. 2 chambers, all right? Now, again, the idea is bicameralism is dividing power just a little bit more, right? To protect this kind of overly powerful legislature. And the idea, think about it, like we have divided government right now. So even if the Republicans wanted something done, they also have to get through a Democratic Senate, right? Even though they control the House. And so this idea promotes, I think it's sometimes probably gridlock, but also it promotes debate, compromise, it slows things down, checks power. All right? Now a couple things. The House was supposed to reflect the will of the people. And the way that's generally done is the fact that, one, members represent a small congressional district, right? More specific people. The other thing is that they have 2-year terms. So every 2 years they have to go back to the people and ask for re-election. And so if the people's mood change, maybe those House members change. Now, that being said, remember that we have a 90% re-election rate in the House. All right. The other thing is the Senate was supposed to be stability, continuity, and in-depth deliberation. Right. This idea of 6-year terms gave them the ability to have discussion and debate, and in some sense be viewed as the upper house, and not ceremonial, but a powerful upper house. All right. All right. The other thing is bicameralism acts as a moderating influence on partisanship. Right? It prevents government from just moving ahead quickly, which again, as we saw in this government shutdown, can be frustrating, but in the same sense, you've got to think of this idea of freedom versus order. All right? Yeah, we need government to be effective, but at the same time, we don't want it to be tyrannical. And so the idea the framers put this bicameralism in there is to slow government down, to force debate, to protect individual freedoms. Right? Okay. Now, again, the Great Compromise was bicameralism was a result of that Great Compromise. Now another thing is the notes talk about a chart in the book, right? There's a chart in your textbook, right, that has differences between the House and the Senate. We're going to look at this in class, but I would definitely take a peek at it as you prepare for this quiz, all right? Now, delegated powers, right? We've seen these before. Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 17 are the enumerated, expressed, or delegated powers of Congress. They're actually spelled out, all right? So here's the deal. All right, I'm going to up the ante a little bit. Expressed or enumerated or delegated powers 1 through 14 that are in the notes right here, they're all in the test. I'm going to have a blank piece of paper or a spot on the test that says 1 through 14. Get them all. All right? Okay, you're welcome. All right, and I think, you look at the big powerful ones. War, declare war. All right, that's important. Regulate commerce, tax, spend money. Those are incredibly important powers that gives tremendous power to government, all right? Implied powers. You know that implied powers are Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the necessary and proper or elastic clause, right? These are things that are suggestive but not actually stated. And remember what our big idea is that we linked the implied powers up to the expressed powers. So where the expressed power says levy taxes, spend money, borrow money, regulate commerce, coin money, right? But it doesn't say create a bank. And so Congress used its implied powers to create a national bank. All right. Now, the idea again behind this is you have a strict constructionist or loose constructionist, right? All those are ways to interpret the Constitution. A strict constructionist would interpret the implied powers narrowly, right? Whereas a broad or loose constructionist would interpret, implied powers could be a lot of things and therefore give more power to Congress, whereas a strict constructionist would narrow the powers of Congress. It's a broad or narrow reading of the Constitution, right? A broad is the loose and a narrow is the strict, all right? Now, inherent powers we listed with the executive branch. Inherent powers are for the executive branch, Article 2 powers that are not specifically listed. We'll really look at those later when we get to the executive branch, all right? Now, these institutional powers, don't worry about calling them institutional powers. Just know that these are related to checks and balances, right? So the Senate ratifies treaties with a 2/3 vote, right? The Senate approves all presidential appointments. So these are the top 10% of the bureaucracy, as we'll see when we get the executive branch. But these are judges, these are the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. Those kind of people all have to be confirmed by the Senate. And to get confirmed, it's a simple majority vote, all right? You don't want to start paying attention to the votes that are required for certain things, all right? All right, now the House votes for impeachment. All right, now again, here's the deal. Impeachment means to charge. It doesn't mean to kick out of office. So the House brings up articles of impeachment, a simple majority to impeach a president, right? Bill Clinton was impeached, all right, by the House. They brought in 3, I think, articles of impeachment against him. All right, the Senate tries to convict for impeachment. Now, to convict of articles of impeachment, you need a 2/3 vote from the Senate. All right, so that's split there. The House and the Senate have different roles in impeachment. All right, so federal judges can be impeached, the vice president can be impeached, the president can be impeached, all right? Civil officers, you know. But remember, Bill Clinton was impeached by the House but not convicted by the Senate, all right? Richard Nixon was never impeached, all right? He resigned before he was impeached, all right? We'll talk about that in class. Now again, the House elects the president if there's no electoral majority, meaning electoral majority means nobody gets 270 electoral votes. The House gets to choose. The Senate gets to choose the VP. All right, and generally they're going to choose it probably from the same party, but that's not always guaranteed. All right, constitutional amendments, right? 2/3 of both houses to propose. All right, and then they can each censure each other. They can seat, unseat, punish each other for various actions. All right, now some of the things that they're denied to Congress: no ex post facto laws, no bills of attainder. Ex post facto is after the fact. So let's say Congress doesn't like people stealing milk. It's not illegal, right? So you steal milk today. Tomorrow they pass a law that says people that steal milk will be thrown in jail for 10 years. And then they go back and punish you for stealing that milk before it was made illegal. That's ex post facto, after the fact. All right, we'll get into a little bit of detail about why those exist. But the idea was, really, you didn't want kings. We had seen these throughout European history where they didn't like the actions of certain people, so they would make the things they were doing illegal and then go back and punish them retroactively and throw them in jail. All right? Bills of attainder are essentially laws that convict people without a trial. You pretty much figure out what that means. They convict people and throw them in jail without a trial. Those are denied. Now, habeas corpus. Congress can suspend habeas corpus in times of rebellion and invasion. Habeas corpus basically protects you from being thrown in jail without a charge. All right? Habeas corpus basically means they need to charge you if they're going to detain you. So they can detain you for a short period, but habeas corpus demands that they actually charge you with the crime to keep you. All right? Because if they charge you with the crime, then your due process rights kick in. You get a lawyer, you get a trial, you get all this kind of stuff. But the habeas corpus protects you from being illegally imprisoned. Meaning, yeah, you're going to jail, no lawyer, no nothing, we're not charging you, we'll find something on you later, and they keep you in prison indefinitely. Right? That's what habeas corpus is. Right? Or protects you against that kind of action, okay? But in rebellion and invasion, they can. So Abe Lincoln does it in the Civil War, right? The Patriot Act treated habeas corpus fairly interesting too. If they thought you were a terrorist, they could detain you, right? Without charging you with something. They thought you were up to terrorist activities because of the Patriot Act. All right? Okay, so that's page 7. Right? Let me check my time here real quick. All right, we're at 8 minutes. Okay, so let's go to page 8. Now, this is just kind of like how the organizational structure of Congress, right? So let's look at the House for a minute, all right? You have a Speaker of the House, all right? And the Speaker of the House is technically in charge of all members of the House. Now, right now, the Republicans have more people in the House, therefore the Speaker is Republican. If the Democrats had more people in the House, then the Speaker would be Democratic, all right? Now, look at some of these powers. They appoint select and conference committees. You're going to see what that means later, all right? We're going to get that when how a bill becomes a law. All right? They appoint the Rules Committee, members and its chairman. The Rules Committee is the traffic cop of legislation in the House. They determine what's going to get voted on, when it's going to get voted on, how it's going to get voted on, and if it even gets to get voted on. The Rules Committee is tremendously powerful. So the fact that the Speaker of the House and the majority party controls that is a tremendous thing. They assign bills to committees. Now what you're going to see later, all right, is that a bill can be sent to a committee where it will be seen favorably and get passed, or a bill can be sent to a committee where it will be seen in an unfavorable light and die and never be seen again. So that's power. All right, they're third in line for the presidency. We've got the vice president, right? Oh, they're not third in line. They're second in line. Those are wrong, you guys. It goes Vice President, Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House is there, right, after the Vice President, all right? And now, informal powers is access to the media. All right, the rank and file members don't have access to the media like the Speaker does. Right, the Speaker is, every time we see the President say something, we get the Senate's response and the Speaker's response. Right, because they're an important media figure. They lead that chamber. All right, so they have special access. All right, and they influence the agenda of the House. They can say when and where and how, if anything's even going to get debated. All right, or if it's not going to get debated. All right. All right, now, you have a majority leader and a minority leader. These are the partisan leaders chosen by their party members, all right? They control the legislative agenda for their party, all right? They're the ones that are strategizing how best to get their party's views through in legislation, all right? So we have the Speaker, who comes from the majority party. We have the majority leader, who comes from the majority party. Then you have a majority whip. Those are all majority party leaders. Now, the minority party in the House is the minority leader and the minority whip, all right? Okay. Now, the other idea is this Rules Committee, all right? The Rules Committee sets the legislative agenda, all right? And this open and closed rule that it creates, we'll talk about that later, all right? Don't sweat it for the quiz tomorrow, all right? Now, in the Senate, we have to get this order. Technically, constitutionally, the Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate who presides over the Senate. However, they only vote in cases of ties, right? This is generally a ceremonial rule. Even though they have, a sweet office in the Senate, all right, they rarely go there, and they only vote in case of a tie, all right? But this can be important, right? Sometimes we'll have an election where we have a 50-50 Senate, Democrats to Republicans. The Speaker can come in and break every tie, and depending on the party, the Vice President, they can break that tie towards one party. All right, now the President pro tempore, the President for a time being, ceremonial. Third in line to be President. Those notes are wrong, I gotta change these. Third in line. It goes Vice President, Speaker of the House, President pro tempore, okay? Now, they preside over the House, the Senate, when the VP is absent. The VP is not going to be there, all right? But the President pro tempore is usually the most senior member of the majority party in the Senate. It's a title given to one of those older guys that have been around a while and aren't necessarily always in the game every day. Generally a ceremonial title, all right? The real leader in the Senate is the majority leader. And look at these powers. They're recognized first for all debates, right? They influence committee assignments for senators. They influence the agenda, and they have access to the media. The majority leader in the Senate is the true leader and incredibly powerful. However, remember what we said about the House versus the Senate. The Senate is much more decentralized, and by decentralized, individual members have power. So it's harder for the majority leader to control the chamber, and it's a little bit easier for the Speaker to control his chamber, the House, because of all the rules and the centralization of power. All right? Now, and then we have minority leaders and minority whips, just like majority leader and majority whips. All right? Now we have filibusters and holds, which we've already talked about. Right? Non-stop debate to kill a bill. All right? The threat of a filibuster is almost as good as a filibuster itself, because you got to either change those parts or you face a filibuster. And if you don't have the 3/5 to end it, you could kill that bill, right? And especially this, especially effective at the end of a term. If the hours are getting short to pass legislation before the term is over, that filibuster could threaten to kill a bill. Or, like, again, change the bill or we'll filibuster it. That has tremendous power. You can get people to change things by threatening a filibuster if you know they don't have the cloture vote. All right, now a hold. We talked about a hold. Any senator can place a hold on a bill or a nomination and delay it. All right, in the past they were used for information, for more time, that kind of thing, right? But recently we've seen them for policy reasons, like the Republicans hating the Democratic agenda, the Democrats hating the Republican agenda, using them politically, all right? Now, look at this, though. To exercise a hold, you simply inform the floor leader that you don't want the bill to be considered, right? Effectively taking it off the table until you clean up that hold. And we talked about that in class the other day, all right? The other things in holds can be placed anonymously. So you won't get critiqued in the media. Now sometimes, like we talked, Senator Mary Landrieu used her hold very publicly, right? To try to get Barack Obama to make some changes as far as offshore oil drilling permits off Louisiana, all right? But the holds are incredibly powerful. So, okay, again, really quickly, I'm going to put all those enumerated powers on the test. Levy taxes, spend money, borrow money, regulate commerce, naturalization, coin money. Know those, all right? It's going to benefit you for the AP exam to sit down and get into that, all right? Check out your numbers, make a list of all the numbers, what's 2/3, what's 3/5, what's a simple majority that you see on these today, okay? All right. All right, have a good day, man. That's less than 15 minutes. Woo! All right, bye, guys.